Next up, we have Liam Price from Civil Engineering to tell us about bringing diverse and authentic assessment strategies to environmental engineering.
Thank you very much. All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Liam Price, and I'm a postdoctoral fellow in civil engineering, as mentioned. And today I'm excited to talk about bringing authentic as well as diverse assessments to this course that I taught. Uh-oh. I've done something. Are we good? We're
Yeah, and you can also just
space? Space bar, okay. So this course that I'm teaching is called Subsurface Contamination. It's a fourth-year technical elective course, and it focuses on the contaminant transport, how contaminants transport through soil and groundwater. So it's not a bridge building course in civil engineering, it's an environmental engineering course in civil engineering. And I want to start off this presentation today by talking about my unique progression through Civil 471. So I started this course as a student back in 2020. I wrote an online exam. And then I went through as a teaching assistant 2021, 2022. And those first three iterations of the course were under three different professors. So I saw how three different professors assessed their students. In 23, and then as well just recently, this past semester, I was a teaching fellow and then an adjunct. So then I was able to bring my own assessments to this course. So let's rewind back to 2020 there. My assessment structure that I had as a student was very, very classic for technical engineering electives that I had at that point. It was 5 individual assignments, a midterm, and a final exam. And the final exam and the midterm were worth a cumulative 75%. And so that has some limitations in terms of assessment design. It's a very narrow assessment design, very individual, no communication, no collaboration. And there's really limited opportunities for that reflection and lifelong learning that we want as instructors for our students. So coming in, what I wanted to do was to incorporate diverse and authentic assessment strategies to enhance engagement, deepen learning, and then support skill development that was aligned with the professional practice of these budding civil engineers. And so come to 2026, fast forward to this semester, this is the assessment techniques that I use to assess my students. You can see there's a lot more. I've diversified the assessments. And so I'm going to go through those as a high level, and each of these assessments was designed to serve a very distinct purpose. And I'm going to talk about the top 2 in more detail today. But first, I implemented a historical case study this year, and that looked to get students engaged with communication and reflecting on the impacts of subsurface contamination. Myself and another professor, Dr. Kevin Mumford, implemented a site investigation project for that authentic assessment piece, as well as teamwork. This was a term project worth 30%. A remediation project or presentation consisted of a literature review and then a presentation looking at public speaking and idea refinement. I've touched something again. Okay, we're back. Looked at participation. So in 10 lectures, I had active learning activities implemented that allowed for that formative assessment piece. And then, of course, I still had examinations to test individual component mastery for each student. And I'm going to focus on those top 2 pieces today, the historical case study and the site investigation project. So getting into this historical case study, this was designed alongside Uni at the Center for Teaching and Learning. And this was to go along with my new course learning objective, which I implemented, which was to reflect on the social and environmental impacts of contaminated sites on individuals and communities. And this was something that was missing from the course when I was a student. It was purely focused on the math and the physics of how chemicals actually move in the ground. And so how I implemented this new case study assessment was I had students form small groups to investigate real contaminated sites and understand how those communities near those sites were actually impacted. I did this really early on in the semester, week 2, maybe even too early on because I still had students enrolling in my course, but we worked through that. And I had the students complete some preparatory research. They then went into tutorial, they discussed, and then they completed a group reflection. So why did I do this assessment? Well, it really establishes that motivation for why we're learning about these the physical equations to say how chemical moves from point A to point B, to highlight the environmental justice impacts of why this is really important. And it's really supporting learning because it's diversifying that assessment beyond the exams, and it's encouraging peer learning and multiple perspectives, similar to what Kate was just saying in her previous with the collective labs. I've put this into one tutorial and had students teach each other about different case studies. And so briefly how this was implemented in tutorial, I tried this jigsaw activity out. As an engineering student graduating in 2020, I had never thought I would do something like this in a tutorial ever. But I was encouraged by the Center of Teaching and Learning to try it out, and it actually worked really, really nicely. So I had students, say in that orange group there, studied a contaminated site in Northern Ontario, and then students in this yellow group studied a contaminated site in, say, the United States, Southern United States. They came together, discussed their research, came up with a 2-minute pitch that they'd like to share with other teams. I split them up into other groups in that tutorial. They talked for about 30 minutes. I encouraged discussion. I had my TAs popping in and out of groups. I was popping in and out of groups to talk to them. And then they came back to their original groups and talked about what they had learned. And so it really puts the student responsible for their learning as well as teaching other students about different cases. And so that was a really interesting piece that I was really fortunate to implement this year. Now the second assessment I want to talk about today is a site investigation report, which focused on authentic assessment. Now, the goal of implementing this assessment was to implement an authentic assessment that was representative of professional environmental engineering practice. The challenge with this is that environmental engineering is really expensive, and I wasn't prepared to tell my students to go hop on a drill rig, go to a contaminated site, and start collecting dirty soil samples. And I don't know if I would have had the funding to do that. I probably wouldn't have. So what I did was, instead of having the students actually go on the field to collect dirty soil samples, was I developed a new course learning objective, which was to simulate the investigation of an environmental contaminated site to the level of competency expected by Canadian regulators. So rather than collecting data, they're getting simulated data. And so I did this, and alongside Dr. Kevin Mumford, who is the other instructor for this course, he developed this really, really cool tool that just looks like this sort of Google Maps picture of this contaminated site. And students were able to click anywhere on that Google Maps picture and collect, say, a soil sample or collect a groundwater sample. And so they're simulating the investigation of this site. And this is really an authentic task that the students might be tasked with after graduation. So one of my students' teams, this is an example of all of the different places they clicked on that map to gather data, and then I tasked them with giving me an environmental site assessment report at the end of the semester, and this was scaffolded with 2 assignments before that, so I knew they were on the right track of their investigation. And then finishing off, the students were able to tell me exactly where they thought the major contaminated zone was, and then where the chemicals were being transported with groundwater. And so that's an example of real, authentic assessment that we were able to implement. Took a lot of time to make this. Obviously, Dr. Mumford, this wasn't an easy endeavor. This was a full research grant that was done to make this software. But it's a worthwhile endeavor to go down to ensure that we can actually train our students to be budding environmental engineers and go out into the world and do this investigation. So I want to finish today with 2 major takeaways. And then the first one, diversifying assessment is going to promote equity, engagement, and multiple ways for students to demonstrate their learning. And authentic, real-world assessments deepen learning, strengthen students' critical thinking, and prepare students for professional practice. I also want to say that this can easily be implemented by adding new assessment strategies. Talk to the Center for Teaching and Learning teams, learn how to implement new activities with low risk and high impact, and I think the students get a lot out of that. Thank you all for your attention today. I'd also like to acknowledge the support of Dr. Kevin Mumford, who helped implement that authentic assessment, Yuni, as well as Satish, who helped me implement those active learning strategies in the class, as well as my TAs, who were the boots on the ground that made all of this happen in tutorial. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciated your presentation, and I think particularly how like you're shifting the assessment. So rather than engaging potentially instructors and revisiting their whole course by adding in an assignment, it allows them to create change. And I wondered if you had any student feedback on either their learning on the exams at the end, whether or not you noticed any improvements in different areas based on the more authentic assessments, or just on their participation or experience in the class.
I swear I didn't plant this question, but I have 2 extra slides that I couldn't fit in of student feedback. So yes, I do. One of my students, with regards to that historical case study assessment, said they liked the mixture of applicable engineering content with research on case studies. So I did get some good feedback. This was midterm feedback that civil engineering does. We get feedback midway through the semester. I haven't gotten the final feedback yet. But seeing that they liked the mixture of doing different activities, I think was a good thing. And then 2 other pieces of feedback that I got were that assignments were practical and relevant to working in industry, and that how the assignments and tutorials are applied to real world problems. And so I would say that, yeah, I think the students did buy in. I also was asking students sort of informally after I ran that historical case study jigsaw activity. I was like, how did you think it went? Because that was a bit of a risk for me. I had no idea how it would go. And a lot of the students were receptive. The major complaint was that it was too loud in the room, which I think was a good thing because that meant that students were talking about the course, hopefully not chatting, but chatting about important topics. Yeah, thank you.
Great presentation, thank you. I was wondering, in relation to what you just spoke about, in the final exam, previously you mentioned it was a very technical course. So in the final exam, were there any real world application questions or any changes versus the past?
Yeah, so that's this year. No, and the reason for that is, so those course learning objectives that I've made, I haven't actually been able to implement in my syllabus yet because there's a whole course review that has to go over with. So I'm hoping those get implemented for the next set of the course. And I was able to squeeze these in based on 3 older course learning objectives. So I haven't implemented that in my examinations yet, but I could see myself going forward onto a final exam, say if I was to teach this course again next year, and say, tell me about the impacts of contamination on 2 examples of a case, like of 2 real world examples and how they impacted communities. So I could see myself being able to implement this, and I think that would really bring it full circle so that it can all scaffold exactly towards the exam. Thanks.
I have a question. You mentioned about the group formation and week 2 being a challenge because people are still dropping the course potentially. I was wondering, what was your strategy for navigating that, and would you change that next time, or was there a benefit to forming those groups so early?
So I think that's a good question. I would probably do it, like, it was hard because I was getting emails, the Monday of week 2, and I had my tutorial on the Wednesday of week 2. And I would probably keep it the same because I don't want to waste that week 2 tutorial to do. Most of the time, I think in previous iterations of the course, I just didn't have tutorials in week 1 and 2. And I don't think that's the best way to go about it. So I just made some adjustments on the fly. Some students who enrolled too late, I said, we'll just put that 2.5% of the preparatory work towards your final exam, but just go do the discussion anyways, and you'll get that other half of the reflection piece for that assessment. Students had signed up afterwards, same thing. I would just weigh that towards the final. So if they missed it, they missed it. But I still think it's worthwhile to get going at that early in the semester, because then if I was to push it back another week, then that pushes sort of all of my other tutorials back a week, and then we just run out of time. So I think that's the right place, and it also sets up the everyone to start thinking about, okay, this is the reason why we're doing this math and this physics. Thanks.